On the third anniversary of our marriage, Jade made a grand, public confession of love to her first love, Henry James, by projecting it onto the big screen in Central Square. The message read, "We're never going to have to miss each other like this ever again." Naturally, I confronted her, asking why she chose that specific night. She shrugged casually, as if it was insignificant, and said, "Because this date is important to you. When you get mad, it makes him happier, and that makes him love me even more." Her words stung, but she seemed completely indifferent to the pain they caused. Trying to play it off and suppress my anger, I posted their declaration online, captioning it with, "A blessing for eternal love." I thought if I turned it into a joke, it might not hurt as much. But as soon as the video started gaining traction and went viral, Jade logged into my account and swiftly deleted it. As expected, I soon received a scolding phone call. Her voice was sharp and dismissive as she said, "I was just trying to make him happy. Do you really have to overreact? Your petty behavior is disgusting." She hung up abruptly. Moments later, I received a photo of Jade and Henry kissing passionately. It was a full-on French-style kiss that left no room for misinterpretation. In the past, such a display would have driven me into a rage, but this time, I took a deep breath, stayed calm, and walked away. Jade finally came home at dawn, her arrival marked by the noise she made as she entered. The sound woke me up. "Luke, I was only gone for one night. Why are you acting like this is a big deal?" she said, her tone casual as if she had done nothing wrong. I glanced at the dining table, where I had intentionally left a mess from my solo candlelit dinner. Usually, I would have cleaned up, stubbornly hoping she'd come home before morning. But after seeing that photo of her and Henry, I felt an odd sense of relief wash over me. I had poured myself a glass of wine, slept soundly, and didn't bother leaving the lights on or waiting for her on the couch. For the first time in a while, there was a sense of peace. She snapped at me, "I'm talking to you, are you deaf?" as she watched me head to the bathroom. I spat out the toothpaste and replied, "If you can't stand it, clean it up yourself." Her face darkened, but to my surprise, she rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning. As she worked, she noticed the 10 empty wine bottles on the table, and her brow furrowed. "You drank all of these by yourself?" she asked, her tone a mix of concern and disbelief. When we got married, we had purchased 10 bottles of wine, planning to open one every 10 years to celebrate our anniversaries. I only had one glass. The rest, I poured down the drain. I didn't offer any further explanation, just a nod. Jade looked genuinely shocked, misinterpreting my silence as a sign of sorrow. "I couldn't get your favorite soup dumplings, but the seafood porridge from next door is just as good. Have some to fill your stomach," she said, placing a container on the table. I replied, "Oh, classic." It was typical of her. Hurt me deeply, then try to make up for it with a sweet gesture. This was her usual pattern of manipulation. I didn't call her out on it, but my thoughts were elsewhere, particularly on the photo Henry had posted earlier. He had shared a picture of Jade in an apron, cooking in a kitchen with the caption, "Someone went to the pier before dawn to get the freshest seafood just to make me a bowl of seafood porridge." Feeling blessed, the woman in the photo, focused and domestic, was a stark contrast to the Jade standing in front of me, who rarely lifted a finger in the kitchen. I opened the container she brought and found the porridge cold, with only a few pieces of scallion and celery. No seafood in sight. I tossed it in the trash just as she turned around. "Luke, I waited in line to get that for you, and this is how you act. So ungrateful." She seemed to believe that a lie, if told convincingly enough, would go unnoticed. I stared at her with a blank expression and said, "I can't eat seafood right now." Her hand, mid-slice as she cut ginger, froze. She snapped, "Stop being so dramatic." I knew what she was really trying to say, but I didn't respond. She vented her frustration before focusing on making hangover soup. The effort she put into this was minimal, especially when compared to the seafood porridge she had made for Henry. As she worked, her phone buzzed, and she gestured for me to hand it to her. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Henry. Without hesitation, I read it aloud. Jade, I feel like the happiest man in the world. She hadn't expected me to read it out loud, especially with the teasing tone I used. Furious, she lost control and smashed the plate she was holding. "Can you stop being such a jerk for once?" she screamed. A shard from the broken plate cut my foot. Blood started to pour out, and I looked at her calmly, saying, "Isn't this how Henry talks to you?" Jade was queasy around blood, and she immediately leaned against the stove, her face pale with panic. "You idiot, can't you move? Don't think that getting hurt will make me care about you." Ignoring her reaction, I grabbed the first aid kit and began stopping the bleeding. When I saw that the cut wasn't healing quickly, I wrapped my foot and prepared to go to the hospital. But Jade, in an attempt to regain control, insisted I drink the hangover soup first. I wasn't drunk, and I certainly didn't want to drink anything she made. In her rush, the hot soup spilled all over her hand, instantly causing blisters. She let out a soft cry of pain, but she didn't curse like she usually would. "You're deliberately making this harder for me, aren't you? Fine, we'll both go to the hospital now." When we reached the parking garage, she offered to drive since my foot was in pain. I didn't argue and slid into the back seat, prompting another sarcastic jab from her. "What? Is the front seat cursed or something?" I rolled down the window, needing some air. No curse, just a lingering scent of Henry's cologne. She looked at me, clearly uncomfortable. I replied casually, "You don't do well with blood." She seemed to calm down a little. "I spilled some perfume yesterday. The smell's probably still hanging around." She handed me a half-empty bottle, saying, "I actually made this as your anniversary gift, but I spilled half of it. You can still have it, though, if you don't mind." I didn't reach for it. I don't do leftovers, whether it's food, someone else's perfume, or anything secondhand, including women. I leaned back. "My foot's bleeding all over your car. Can we get to the hospital already?" Jade went quiet. Her attempt at kindness had fallen flat, but she kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror as if she had something on her mind. The drive to the hospital was tense and silent, the air thick with resentment. When we arrived, I insisted on limping to the reception alone, refusing Jade's help. She followed behind, but I kept my distance, avoiding even a glance in her direction. The doctor examined my foot and said the cut didn't need stitches, just proper cleaning and dressing. He recommended I rest. Jade sat in the corner the entire time, scrolling through her phone, likely waiting for a message from Henry. The thought of it made my stomach turn. On the way back, she tried to start a conversation. "Are you okay, Luke?" she asked. I responded flatly, "Sure." She pressed on. "Do you want to eat something?" I shot back. No, I could see the unease in her eyes. My calmness was unsettling her, and I knew it. She was used to me exploding, expecting an outburst or some dramatic reaction. But this time, I stayed composed, and it clearly unnerved her. We had fought again, but this time, the usual rush of anger that always surged in these moments was gone. In its place was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The moment we got home, I didn't say a word. I headed straight to the bedroom, leaving Jade alone in the dimly lit living room, her silence hanging heavy between us. I needed space, time to breathe away from the chaos that had become our routine. I heard her moving around the house, but I didn't turn back. A few minutes later, she appeared in the doorway, her figure a shadow against the hallway light. She stood there, hesitant, her face half hidden in the gloom, and for a long moment, there was only the sound of her shallow breathing. "Luke, can we talk?" she finally asked, her voice quiet and tentative, as if she knew she was treading on fragile ground. Slowly, I turned to face her, my eyes meeting hers with a heavy look of fatigue and resignation. "Talk about what, Jade?" I replied, my voice flat. "About how you spent the day with Henry while I was here alone, or maybe how you profess your eternal love for him while you play house with me." My words cut through the stillness, and I watched as she swallowed hard, the reality of my words sinking in. Her eyes flickered with something, regret perhaps, but I wasn't interested in deciphering it. This wasn't going to be the conversation she wanted. I didn't want things to end up like this, Luke, she whispered, her voice cracking like glass. I don't know what I'm doing. There was a tremor in her tone, a hint of desperation that would have moved me once, but now it felt like a distant echo. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and empty. I know exactly what you're doing. You're keeping me as your backup, your safety net in case things don't work out with him. But I'm done, Jade. She took a step forward, reaching out as if to touch me, a gesture that once might have softened my resolve. But I pulled back, my hand raised in warning. Don't, I said, my voice cold, the kind of cold that leaves no room for negotiation. You made your choice when you stood up in front of everyone and confessed your love for him. Now, it's my turn to make mine. I walked to the closet, the sound of the sliding door cutting through the silence as I grabbed my suitcase. I began pulling clothes from hangers, tossing them into the suitcase with an almost mechanical precision. Each item landed with a finality that made Jade's face go pale, the reality of the situation settling in. Luke, you're not serious, she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. I've never been more serious, I replied, my tone firm and unyielding. I've spent too long trying to fix something that's been broken from the start. I deserve better than being a pawn in your game. As I zipped up the suitcase, she dropped to her knees, tears spilling down her cheeks. But for the first time in years, I felt nothing, no sympathy, no regret, just a deep, overwhelming sense of relief. Her tears, which once held power over me, were now just water. I walked past her, suitcase in hand, and headed for the door. Luke, please don't leave me, she begged, her voice breaking, her hands reaching out in one last desperate attempt to pull me back. You've been leaving me every day for years, I replied, my voice calm and detached. I'm just doing what I should have done a long time ago. I closed the door behind me, and the sense of freedom that washed over me was immediate. It felt as if I had shed a heavy weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The night air outside was cool, the city quiet in the late hour. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem like a threat. It felt like an open road, full of possibilities, stretching out before me. I walked aimlessly through the quiet streets, the pavement beneath my feet a steady rhythm that matched the beat of my thoughts. Each step felt like I was closing a chapter, a weight lifting off my shoulders. The city's lights blurred into a soft haze, and the noise of passing cars became a distant hum. Eventually, I found myself in front of an all-night diner, its neon sign flickering. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine smile tug at my lips. I walked inside, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window, watching the world outside pass by. The steam from my coffee curled upwards, filling the space between me and the glass. My phone buzzed, and I didn't need to check to know it was Jade. She had been calling and texting nonstop since I left. But I ignored them all. It was always the same: fights, tears, promises to change, more fights, and even more pain. But not anymore. This time, I was free. When I finished my coffee, I knew I needed to figure out the next step. I called a friend I trusted, someone who had seen the warning signs with Jade long before I did. Luke, he answered, his voice groggy from sleep. Yeah, it's me. I need a favor. I knew this day would come. Get over here. My place is yours, he replied without hesitation. I arrived at his apartment, a modest but peaceful place that felt like a sanctuary. The distance from Jade felt like a breath of fresh air. I collapsed on the couch, exhaustion taking over, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of contentment. I slept deeply, without the nightmares that used to plague my nights. When I woke up, my phone was flooded with messages from Jade. The first few were filled with apologies and promises, the same cycle I had heard so many times before. Then came the insults, the accusations. The last message was a thinly veiled threat. If you think you can leave me and move on, you're dead wrong. I exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of detachment. I had expected this. Jade couldn't handle rejection, especially not from someone she saw as beneath her precious Henry. But this time, her words had no power over me. I ignored the messages and went about my day, knowing she would spiral into her own chaos eventually. Later that afternoon, I took a step I had been avoiding for years. I went to the bank and closed all our joint accounts. I also initiated the divorce process, making it clear through my lawyer that I wanted nothing from her, only my freedom. The papers were sent, cutting off all direct communication. As expected, Jade tried everything to get under my skin. She called my friends, showed up at my workplace, and flooded social media with dramatic posts, painting herself as the perfect victim. In every post, she hinted that I had abandoned our marriage because I couldn't handle a strong woman like her. But none of it fazed me. Each day that passed only confirmed that I had made the right decision. One night, I received a message from Henry. It was brief. "She's all yours now." Attached was a photo of Jade, crying on the sidewalk outside his building, clearly discarded. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message and blocked his number. There was no space in my life for these people anymore. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Jade made one last desperate attempt to contest the agreement, demanding a share of my assets. But her lawyer crumbled in court. With no evidence or valid claims, the judge saw through her manipulation, and she walked away with nothing. Freedom was finally mine. Time moved on, and so did I. I found a new job, made new friends, and rediscovered joy in life's small moments. The pain and chaos that once consumed me faded into a distant memory, like a bad dream I had finally woken up from. One day, out of curiosity, I walked through Central Square, where Jade had made her grand declaration to Henry. The place had changed, renovated and full of life, but to me, it was just a silent reminder of everything I had survived. As I strolled through the square, I saw Jade in the distance, sitting alone with a vacant, lost expression. I felt no anger, no pity, only indifference. She tried to catch my eye, but I kept walking, never looking back. There was nothing left for me there. I was free,